So, Sage and Ulysses will be reviewing Doom Dark Ages here. This is the third Doom game here in the recent series of Doom games that recently released, starting with Doom 2016. Sage and Ulysses, take it away.
Well, this is it's an interesting game, and there are some ups and downs. But first of all, this is a game that you can tell was not planned. They wrapped it up with the last one. This is a prequel. It's taken place well before the 2016 game, and again, there's some mixed things. There's lots of good stuff that's going to come too. But I figured to start just with some of the negatives. You get to see this whole dimension Argentinor. This is crazy, like medieval space knight world. And you explore it when it's been kind of destroyed already in the last game, and this is you kind of getting to see it supposedly at like the height of its existence. But it's just the kind of thing where you could tell they weren't planning on ever showing it because it never comes across as cool as the way they made it sound. And some of these human characters are just very kind of dull and boring. Like they seem like they're almost taking themselves maybe too seriously. And that just comes in where there's sometimes a little too much plot in general in this game.
Yeah, I'd say going into this, I was very kind of dubious with how this would turn out because, like, this felt like they were just doing it to make another Doom, not because they had a great idea for a game in the pipe. It's just because, well, Eternal did well, let's make another one. And the idea of setting it in the Doomslayer's past didn't really make a lot of sense to me because what we get is mostly just like lore entries that are like written to be as over the top as possible. And very little of the games has been like this sort of cinematic story with multiple named characters conversing and about stuff going on. It's just sort of Doomslayer running around punching demons and you find out about his past a little bit. And so this game kind of comes in strong with like, yeah, there's these characters. There's Novik and there's Thera and there's Creed and you're gonna love them. And it kind of feels like they took the focus off of the Doomslayer a bit, which is a bit of a mistake, especially because they kind of tried to do two things at once, which is have this story about all these different characters, but also preserve the sort of fantasy, a power fantasy of being the Doomslayer when you play, where everything's all about you. And those two elements just don't mesh well. But I do think the actual gameplay is what saves it.
Okay.
And it's a very different type of gameplay, too. Like, the last game, you would... Because I've heard other people say this, but like you can describe it as like you're like a fighter jet, and then here it's almost like you're a tank. And there's some minor quibbles with the gameplay, too. But for the most part, I think it manages to be super super fun. The shield saw is amazing. Like that honestly is kind of worth the price of entry by itself. And one of the things though that I don't love is in the last game, like every gun had a very specific enemy that it worked against, and so you had to use everything, like every single tool you used at some point or another because everything had specific weaknesses. And here you can kind of just pick whatever gun you like the most and just use that on every enemy, which I think I understand. I do believe that the last game was hard. It was tough. And I'm guessing that some people just felt like it was a little too tough. And so this game, and it's not to say it's bad, but it does feel like it is aiming to have a more casual audience and that it's appealing to, which is fine. But I was honestly shocked at how easy it was at times.
Yeah, I also felt that way. Like most of the game, you can just sail through in very little effort. It can be quite quick, despite the fact the levels are actually fairly long. And I feel like a big part of this game's issue, this is a very mixed thing, is id got a lot of criticism for Doom Eternal. There are people who said it was too fast. There are people who said that the guns were too finicky. There were people who said that the glory kills were too much, that they slowed down the pacing. And so id went, okay, we'll listen to all of that, and we'll take out everything you guys didn't like. And then this is the result. And unfortunately, I think there is also a lot of stuff that maybe had been on the cutting room floor of other games that they had to fill this one up with. And that, again, is a very mixed thing, because there's a lot of stuff where it just sort of feels like it's thrown in, but at times it is kind of cool. You do have enemies designs that are from basically every game in the entire series. Like that right there is a vagary from Doom 3. It's got a little update. They got demons in there from Doom 2. They got them from Doom 64. Just little tributes to every moment of the franchise, basically. So this is not a bad game. It's just that there's a lot of weird sort of quibbles that I think hold it back from the masterpiece that Eternal was. And a lot of that is especially noticeable just in like the fact that there's not really a set sort of gameplay style like Eternal had, where it was always the kind of run and gun. Every gun has its purpose. You got to use it with strategy in mind. And this, it is kind of like giving the player permission to just do whatever they want.
So what difficulty did you two play it on?
So I started on normal, but after the first couple of levels, after it was so easy, I bumped it up to hard. I forget exactly what the names for each of those are, but they have their
Ultra
own
violence.
versions. Ultra violence. So I bumped it up to ultra violence, and even then, I kind of still breezed through the rest of it. To be honest, like I I didn't, but I was debating bumping the difficulty up again just because I still felt like it was too easy at times. Now fun, don't get me wrong, fun and still satisfying in a power fantasy ultra violence sort of way, which I mean ultimately is what you want. But again in Doom Eternal, the satisfaction of the power fantasy came at the when you survived something. It came at the end of a level, or it came at the end of a fight, and you felt like, oh yeah, I nailed that, but it was a struggle to get it right. Whereas here, it just feels like that feeling is constant, like you just are always on top. Uh, at least I felt like it with maybe one or two little special side challenges I found that were slightly tougher. But even then, it was mostly just because the room was small, and this game also has like a whole parry system that's kind of new to this one, where you have to, based on the color of the enemy attacks, you have to use your shield at the right time. But also, if you're hitting those right, you do these like kind of auto parry attacks once you get to the right upgrades that just, I mean, you're just melting through enemies like butter.
Yeah.
I played the game twice so far. Once on Ultraviolence, and then again on Nightmare. And that was like the second highest difficulty or something.
Third.
And what?
Third highest, I think.
I believe all the other difficulties are basically just Nightmare, but with like restrictions, like you only get like one death or something like that.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
There's Pandemonium, Ultra Nightmare.
that's right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and I felt that even on Nightmare, it was very easy overall. Like, there are moments where the game will throw a challenge at you, or little elements that seem maybe like they're not quite balanced properly, but the majority of the time that there is an imbalance, it's usually in the player's favor. Like the shield you get, which is sort of the signature thing in this game, that felt like you just have God mode on sometimes, because you can block any attack, you can parry many attacks, and unless your shield breaks, it's like you're not actually vulnerable. And many of the guns are like ridiculously powerful. You can shred most demons in like a couple of shots. And generally speaking, I would say that the enemy attacks, with a couple of exceptions, are much slower and easier to read than an Eternal. So it feels like like a game for people who felt that Eternal was too hard.
Okay, so you think they overcorrected from the criticism they got from fans? And
I personally think there could have been more difficulty in it. However, I don't think this is necessarily like a bad level of easiness. Like, the game is fun. There are stakes at times, but more or less you're just kind of there for a good romp through a level. And I think part of the reason that the game is kind of saved, in that sense, is another thing they did differently from Eternal is they changed the level design quite radically. In Eternal, uh, levels mostly consisted of a handful of arenas and linear pathways and puzzles to get from one arena to the others, right? And in this game, there are levels like that, but there are a surprisingly large number of levels that are almost more like classic Doom, like Doom 2 or something, where the game just throws you in a huge open area, says go where you want, do what you want in whatever order, and maybe you have to collect a key to open the door, or you have to get some MacGuffin to advance the story in a certain order. But generally speaking, you're just given complete free reign of the map. And there are just tons of enemies thrown at you in every given place, and you're just kind of permitted to explore and fight them as you wish, which is something you don't see very often in a modern shooter, which I think makes it a lot of fun and very unique.
Okay. And this is roughly the same length as Doom Eternal?
I think this is
It's got
longer.
twice as many levels.
Okay. Gotcha.
And because a lot of the levels have that open design, a lot of the levels, even on top of there being twice as many, a lot of the levels also take a lot longer to get through.
Though it is worth pointing out that a few of the levels are basically the new mech and dragon minigame levels, and those are fairly short.
Yeah, because that's two whole kind of new types of gameplay that they've introduced here. The mech
I will
ones.
say,
Sorry.
no, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, so I was just gonna say that the mech level, the first one is, I think we both found to be kind of disappointing. It just felt so simple and like very limited on interactivity. Uh, I will say there's a couple more of them later in the game, and I think those are a lot better. Um, but they definitely still could have maybe just fleshed out the mechanics of it more, or maybe cut one entirely just to make it a little like more of a special moment when they happen. On the other hand, the dragon levels I thought were really cool because those you like seamlessly transition from being on the back of the dragon, flying around, shooting like ships in the air, to landing and getting off, going back to regular gameplay, moving through like a level, and then getting back on the dragon. And I thought because the dragon felt like it was augmenting the regular gameplay instead of being its own whole type of gameplay, that made it work really well. Whereas like with the mech, it was like this is its own type of gameplay. You're not getting in and out in between other things, and that's part of what made that one not work as well.
Yeah, I would say. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I would say that the first few levels of the game, I was like, yeah, this is okay. I wasn't really sure if I was getting my money's worth. Because it's decently made, but it didn't do anything like really exciting for the first 3-4 levels. But the fifth level, which coincidentally is the first dragon level, is where things started to really come together. Because then you have the dragon, which is just kind of so-so, like purely in terms of its mechanics, but as a mobility tool for like expanding like what they can do with map design was a brilliant choice. And then you have these cool sequences where you're shooting down a ship and then it transitions to you jumping onto the ship, boarding it, fighting your way through it, jumping out a window onto the ground, fighting some other stuff, and then getting back on your dragon. Like, it's a really kind of fun experience that you wouldn't have expected from a Doom game. And as the game goes on, it starts to reward you more and more with those kinds of like novel level design scenarios, especially when it gets to the cosmic realm levels, which are like a whole completely different sort of atmosphere with different enemy types and like just generally it's this weird eldritch nightmare realm, which is very different from the sort of hell thing. We've been to hell plenty of times in Doom. It's nice to see something fresh.
That really is kind of, I would say, the best thing about the game is the stretch where you go to the cosmic realm, because then it's very obviously like Lovecraft inspired, and this is something me and Ulysses have talked about a lot, but it also feels like they are very on the sly introducing a lot of like Quake elements to Doom, which is interesting because it's Quake, I feel like, is, as far as the mainstream audience goes, a much less well-known franchise. And I definitely am hoping that they make a return and do a new one of those. And this could maybe be set up for that happening.
From the trailer, I mean, it set up all these big metal moments in here. The mech fight here, you're riding a creature there with wings. Do those moments in the trailer they live up to when you actually play them in the game, or
I would say
Well,
for
those
the
dragon
most
moments
part,
do.
the
Yeah, I'd say
mech is a
for the most part.
little. The mech gets better later, but it starts off a little eh. But the
Yeah, the
dragon
first
is
time
just
you get
fun.
in there. Yeah, the dragon's great the first time you use it, and I think every time the mech, that first level, it's just like it feels like a mini game and just not that well thought out of one.
okay,
Like Ulysses said, they add stuff to it, and you get into it multiple times, and later scenes are like, all right, this kind of redeems itself. But the first time around, and that's also partially, it's within those first kind of four levels that generally felt a little lackluster. Um, and so the game does not start on the best foot, but yeah, like once you get a third into it, and then especially once you're halfway through, because that's where the kind of Cthulhu Lovecraft stuff really starts happening, I'd say it rockets up in quality as it goes.
mm, okay. So would you say the third one is the weakest out of the three? Doom 2016, Doom Eternal is the weakest one.
I
I
would
think it is
say
the weakest.
so. I would say so, but with the caveat that it is still very good.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay.
It's kind of like your favorite meal gets made, you can't finish it, you got to put some leftovers in the fridge. Maybe it reheats okay in the microwave, but it's still one of your favorite meals.
Yeah. Then when you get a pizza, and it's like, okay, maybe it's not the best pizza have ever eaten, but it's still pizza, and I like pizza.
Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I do think that this game it'll have a bit of that broad audience appeal because it is so much easier in Doom Eternal. Like I'll be honest, it was a hard game. Like I was physically sweating and my hands would hurt sometimes playing Doom Eternal. So I get that. So not everybody loved how difficult the game could be. So this game, I think, in the long term, is going to also have legs with just a casual audience that doesn't want to, bang their head against a wall during a video game and just want something easy and breezy. So it's going to be very appealing to those sorts of players.
So it got positive reviews. It reached 3 million players in its first week. So it's that there. Critic wise, did pretty well. So on Metacritic on PC, got 85 out of 100, pretty much 85 out of 100 across the board. Also on consoles, there it got 85 there on PS5, and for Xbox, 86 out of 100 there. Open Critic, 96% recommended. There, you get critics who praise the innovative combat mechanics, atmospheric setting. You got that as well there. So yeah, so seems to be pretty solid there from the fans and people of the Doom community. Are they feeling the same way you guys do? Do you like pretty much like, yeah, it's not as good, but it's still, hey, it's still a fun Doom game.
That's generally what I feel like I've heard for the most part. It does seem like the sales numbers are down a bit, but honestly, I think that's due to a lot of people playing it on Game Pass because they can get it for free.
Yeah, you can get it on Game Pass. You can get on there. The price for this game, and you guys played it on console.
I played it on
I played it
PC.
on console. Yeah, Ulysses played it on PC.
Okay. And is there any big difference there? You think you had a better experience playing on PC there, Ulysses, as opposed to Sage, or?
I feel like it was the same, though I should point out I did have a strange bug. Um, so when I initially installed the game and I ran it for the first time, I got a bunch of pop-up windows like, "Oh, you got to update your drivers," and it was like, I'll get back to that." And so I played it just to test to see if it worked, and it worked great. And so then the second time I loaded up the game, I was like, "Okay, I'll update the drivers like it wants me to. I'll get the newest one." And when I did, apparently having the best drivers for your graphics card actually makes the game run like shit. And so I had to roll back my drivers to like a way earlier version so it would run properly again. I don't know what was up with that, but apparently I'm not the only one having that issue. There's been somewhat of a there's been a number of rage threads on like Reddit and stuff from people who have like the best graphics hardware and the most updated drivers, and the game doesn't run so well on them, which is a little silly because the game was kind of marketed alongside like the newest like PC graphics card. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I was able to roll it back and have a good experience afterward.
Okay. Any
I
issues?
only had one glitch too. I fell through the floor on the map once, but a quick reload fixed it, and I never had another problem.
Okay, so no real big issues there. Okay, gotcha. All
Yeah, I
right.
also got stuck in the floor once, but again, reload fixed it without an issue.
Okay. And so the price of this, $70. If you don't have Game Pass, so it is that. Think it's worth $70?
It probably is going to depend on just how big a fan of Doom you are. Like if you aren't like a Doom fan and you just want to enjoy a random game, mm, I don't know if it's going to be worth that full $70 price. I think if you are a big Doom fan and you're going to play the game multiple times and return and revisit and try out different, weapons and strategies and do the challenges, I think then it is worth the money. Like for me, I certainly will end up getting all that out of it and however many hours that ends up taking. Um, but mileage will vary, and like I think we both said, it's not as good as the last Doom game. It's not the best Doom that you could play. So, I think yeah, it's like I said, it's going to be somewhat dependent on how big a fan you are.
Hmm.
Speaking as a big time Doom fan and someone who was skeptical going into the game if it would be worth the price, I would say I'm happy with my purchase at this point.
Okay, so you're happy paying the
Yeah.
$70? Okay. Well, let's see if you'd be happy
One
paying
more
80
thing.
for the
I don't know about 80. I only got so much money.
Yeah.
One other thing too, I do want to mention. There was a big public, fallout between the composer Mick Gordon and Bethesda after Doom Eternal released. And one of the things that makes Doom Eternal such an amazing experience is the just godly production on the soundtrack. And so he did not return, and the music in this game is not bad by any means. It's I think it's good, certainly good enough for like background video game level music. It fits the tone and everything, and it still has the same broad style, but it does feel sound design wise like a big step down from the last game, just because the last game was one of the best soundtracks in a video game I think that has ever been, and this unique feel to it, just masterful use of weird sound effects, like kind of like heavy metal and like this kind of electronic mesh. And like even that one of the songs in Doom Eternal had like an entire choir of just the lead singers of heavy metal bands, which is this like very, I thought, genius idea to do. And this game, I feel like the music is again not bad, but just kind of unremarkable.
It just kind of feels like a generic sort of shooter soundtrack at times. There's some good little metal moments here and there, especially later in the game, but it's nothing that you're going to really find yourself listening to like when you're not playing the game.
Yeah, like Doom Eternal, I'd put like the songs on a playlist and I'd listen to those outside of the game, but definitely wouldn't put this one.
Hmm. Okay. So what will be your rating there for Doom Dark Ages there?
I think I would give it a low peak.
Okay.
It still climbs quite high by the end of the game. Like I said, every kind of third of the game interval, it does something that's like, oh wow, okay, this is kicked up a notch. And especially kind of most of the last third of the game being this kind of Lovecraftian thing. I think that's like maybe the coolest I've ever seen, kind of like a Cthulhu world depicted in a video game. I think that honestly is the best it's been done so far. So there's still a lot here. There's a lot of entertainment to be had and replays, especially if you're into that sort of thing. Yeah, it still gets up to like a low peak, but it definitely has just enough weird little things and small things, especially in the earlier part, where it's still a step down from the last game. But to be fair, anything's going to be a step down from like perfect. So
Mm, okay. So low
I would
peak.
have to agree with that. I would also give it a low peak. Compared to Doom Eternal, which is like a 10 out of 10 perfect game, this is not that degree. But if you're someone who enjoys Doom or even just a good shooter, this is definitely worth picking up. And the more you stick with it, the more the game sort of rewards you. If you just kind of want to play the first few levels, maybe don't bother because it's not going to be that exciting. But if you want to play through the whole thing, you really want to sink your teeth into it, it's going to be a good time. I especially think that kind of the lackluster story elements kind of go away a bit in the later half of the game. The game kind of just remembers more of what it's trying to actually do. And a lot of the weapons and the upgrades, as much as they make the game almost comically easy at times, are just a lot of fun to get off now and then. Yeah, I would say that this is a pretty good time. I mean, I've played through the game twice. I've 100%ed it at this point, so that's definitely a recommend for me.
Wow, 100% it twice. Wow. Yeah. I mean, some of the weapons they look really fun. You get the skull gun when you pop the skull, and that looks really fun.
The shrapnel of the skull coming out the end. That one's great.
Yeah,
The shield looks
great,
pretty.
great weapon design. I especially love the chain shot. It's like a gun that like punches enemies in the face with a giant ball, basically.
Yeah, that was my personal favorite that I stuck to a lot, is because it literally is a gun that punches people in the face. It's great.
The melee system is also pretty fun. At least the flail and the mace are. Sorry, the dread mace, because of course it has to be called that. But I thought the fist that you start with kind of sucks, though. So there
Yeah,
is
that
that.
first melee weapon is super weak, but yeah, thankfully the other two are awesome. I mean, when you get that blast weapon, you almost feel like Sauron just knocking low level demons just flying away from you.
Mm. I heard there's people are upset that the melee has like a timeout on it. Like you have to like wait and then use melee at a certain.
Oh, it's like it has ammo, like
Yeah.
the same way a gun does. Basically, I think that's fine because the game is so fucking easy anyway. To be
It
honest,
is.
and I feel like if you could just use the melee constantly without any sort of cooldown or reload necessary, then there would what little challenge the game has would be instantly gone if you did that.
To be honest, I like the melee system because it's designed to be different from the old chainsaw system, which is just sort of you have fuel, you insta kill a demon, you get ammo. This is more like you have these charges, and uh, you won't necessarily kill a demon unless you're using the dread mace. But as you use charges, there are actually ways that you can sort of restock them. There's a little bit of strategy to it with some weapons where if you get a headshot, you refill a little bit of your melee charge and all that. And I kind of wish the game had leaned into mechanics like that a little more to kind of do something on the level of Eternal while still being, fairly different to actually play.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. And then some people said that they took away the glory kills. Some people are upset about that.
They
Yeah,
did
that's
take
definitely
away
a negative for us.
they took away most of the glory kills. There are a few under very special circumstances, like for example, if you shield charge a dazed enemy from above, you get a glory kill. But those are fairly rare. And yeah, I thought that was disappointing because I mean I enjoyed the glory kills in Eternal, and obviously you have a lot of people who didn't enjoy that. They're like, oh, I don't want to watch the same animation all the time every time I kill something. But in this, it's like, okay, well you watch the same kick animation or punch animation every time instead, but it's just not as exciting.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, I loved the glory kill system in the last two games. I mean, it was like every enemy you had the potential to do like a Mortal Kombat fatality on, and I thought the animations were always really really slick. And even in the last two games, if you didn't want to do the glory kill, you could just keep shooting them, and they'd still like you weren't required to do them. So if you didn't care for them, I feel like you could bypass them anyway. So I find it weird to leave them out as much as they did. Like Ulysses said, you can still get them under certain special circumstances, but I think they should have. I wish they would have left him in. I thought that was one of my favorite parts of the presentation of the last two games.
Mm. Okay. All right. So two low peaks from Sage and Ulysses for Doom Dark Ages. Are they planning another one? Is it talks of another one?
Well, the way
They're
that the
definitely
game
going to
was
do
laid
DLC
out,
for this one. I don't know if they're going to
yeah,
do a fourth game.
Okay.
yeah, because we know so in the 2016 Doom, you're as you're wandering around, especially in the first couple levels, you get a lot of lore entries about how you got there. Because that game starts and you're like sealed in a coffin at the bottom of a castle, and you get like summoned out through magic, uh and then there's like this backstory that because the old Doom 1 and 2 from the 90s, those games are still canon. So it actually goes Doom 1, Doom 2, Doom 64, and then there's a big gap where a bunch of stuff happens off screen, and then 2016 picks up with him, and somehow he'd been trapped under this castle or whatever. So this game is meant to be a prequel, right? That's taking place in between the original two, or in 64, so those three, and then the two newest ones. But this game does not end with him getting a castle dropped on him, even though that is where we know that if we see that, then there's no more room, there's no more gaps in the timeline. You can't fill anything in. So this game does not end there, but there's also nothing saying that the DLC couldn't possibly end there. So we'll see.
I do think that's another part of what makes this game's story a little silly, because it wants you to care about these other characters who you already know are dead by the time Eternal starts.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and then this human civilization in Argentinor just feels like it kind of feels like just a regular plain old human civilization on Earth. And when you see in an Eternal, you see this civilization just from a point of destruction. Like it's gone. It's like a relic of the past. You don't see it in motion. You're not interacting with the people that live there. And the lore entries being these over the top kind of backstory descriptions, it imposes this much more interesting, epic, over the top kind of story of what happened there. And then when you're actually in the first couple of levels really spending time there, it's like, I mean, they kind of just seem like regular humans, but with just in a slightly different setting. Whereas, like, they really talked him up as though they were this like epic, like uh that like island of Numenor and Lord of the Rings sort of like, Camelot style, like really, really epic kingdom, but they kind of just come across as generic humans.
And that's part of the problem with the characterization of the Doomslayer in this as well, because they want to preserve the power fantasy elements that people liked in 2016 and Eternal, where the Doomslayer just swaggers around, everybody's afraid of him. I mean, that's cool, it's fun. But the problem is that you already established in the lore that the people of Argent Denor were like people that Doomslayer actually respected, that they like genuinely like stood like shoulder to shoulder against the demons, right? They're not just generic corporate drones who have unleashed evil on the world. These are the people that like Doomslayer spent so much time with that he almost became one of them. And then in this game, it's just sort of like, oh well, they're just like the people in Eternal. They're just kind of idiots who are scared of him, basically.
Hmm. Okay. Well, great review from Sage and Ulysses there. Doom Dark Ages. Pick it up now. People have the option to do that. But if you have Game Pass, pick it up. Rent it if you have that. So I do have it on Game Pass. So I'll be playing it maybe eventually there down the line there. Hopefully, thank you for that tip there, Ulysses. I will not be updating my drivers. Thank you. So thank you for that. All right.